Hello and welcome in to the NFL team previews, the division edition, if you will. We've obviously done this a few times as a division. We've been doing it as divisions, and I think it's gone pretty well. I've had some good comments on YouTube and everything else like that, so I appreciate that as well as any sort of feedback from people. We are on the NFC North, which has changed. I don't want to say drastically because I don't think one player drastically changes one thing or another. Very few would do that. But Micah Parsons is now part of the NFC North, obviously being traded from the Cowboys to the Packers over the last few days. And then we have our first game coming up in a couple of days. So you're going to get all three divisions that are left in quick succession from me. So we're looking at the NFC North, as I mentioned. The Chicago Bears are the first one that come up, and with myself getting into this kind of podcasting and everything else like that, I've actually had a soft spot for the Bears because of other podcasters or other media outlets and stuff like that. So I've actually followed them a little bit closer than probably what I would normally do. But last year, obviously they had the first overall pick. They brought in Caleb Williams out of USC. And he struggled year one. And the coaching and the offensive line and just situational football was very poor out of Chicago last year. There were games where they could have won, but didn't because they didn't call a timeout in time. There were coaching decisions made or things not being looked at in film that cost them games and stuff like that. I believe the block field goal against the Packers was one instance where the Packers knew they could get in and block a field goal, and they ended up doing it to win. I think it was the first game they played last year. Caleb struggling. They've made major changes to the offensive line. They've made major changes to some weapons and everything else like that. So realistically, year two, where we do see a sophomore slump sometimes from people, is really about, is Caleb the guy? I don't think the offensive line will necessarily, barring injury and everything else like that, I don't think the offensive line is going to be an excuse. They got rid of Matt Eberflus, who just was not a great head coach. It was the first time I believe the Bears had fired a head coach in the middle of the season throughout their entire history. So that's how bad he was. They hired a Lions offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson, and at least from what we've seen in preseason and training camp and everything, it's a lot tougher. It has a lot more expectation for perfection, especially from Caleb Williams. Offensive line help that came in. Drew Dahlman came in as a free agent from the Falcons. He's their new center, at least starting center. Joe Tooney, former Patriot, was with the Chiefs the last few years, was traded to the Bears. Jonah Jackson from the Ravens was traded over. So 2 new guards and a new center. Tackles is where that there wasn't so much change. They drafted a few. Ozzie Trapilo out of Boston College. Case Keenum was kind of brought in to be the backup and kind of be that veteran presence. And Case Keenum's traveled around a little bit. Was a starter for the Rams before Jared Goff. Not the world's greatest professional quarterback, but holds NCAA records. Has a lot going, as far as leadership ability. That's always been good for him. So I think that was a big pickup to help Caleb as far as all that stuff. Colston Loveland was their first round pick, 10th overall, the tight end out of Michigan. Now he came out of college injured. So how much time is he going to miss at the beginning, if any at all? Luther Burden Jr. Sorry, not Jr. Luther Burden, second round pick out of Missouri, who I thought he was one of the best wide receivers available. So, good weapons coming in for Caleb. DeMarcus Walker left. Brian Cohort left to go to the Jets. Keenan Allen is back with the Chargers now. And Tommy Sweeney, the tight end, didn't actually sign anywhere. So, again, not losing a ton with that. It's whether or not the quarterback play is going to elevate this team. I think the offense is going to be better under Ben Johnson. He's great for coming up with schemes and everything else like that. He's obviously not a defensive coach. So how does that take a hit if the defense takes a hit? Can he be a total head coach? Is the question realistically that you're going to get from a lot of people. Is Ben Johnson great as an all-around head coach, or is he just an offensive guru? We've seen it tons of times where offensive coordinators get head coaching jobs, and a lot of things fall through the cracks. Ben Johnson doesn't seem the type, but again, we've seen it more often than not, I would say. There are just offensive coaches that just are good at that. Cliff Kingsbury is one of those guys that comes to mind. He is great at running an offense. He isn't great at necessarily coaching the entire or looking at the big picture. That's when you got to put people in place to do that. Has Ben Johnson done that? There's no real way to know that until the games start getting played. Can the Bears compete for a division title? I still think they're probably a year away. And once a new system comes into place, a la Ben Johnson as the head coach, obviously, you're looking at time it takes to learn that system. Does it work with the bodies you have in place? Do you need to go out and get different ones? Those are all the questions that always come up with new coaching staffs and everything else like that. So I wouldn't expect a division title out of the Bears. I think they're going to be better. I certainly don't think they're going to be picking in the top 10. Next, the Detroit Lions, which had a phenomenal year last year. The problem was their first playoff game, they played the Commanders and lost. So all of that hype from the year before where they were in the NFC Championship game, they didn't win it. The 49ers obviously took it that year. To then the hype that, hey, they're coming back around. They're out for blood. They want to get to the Super Bowl. They want to win the Super Bowl. This is the team from the NFC. And obviously they couldn't even get out of the first playoff game they played. So where do you tweak a Lions team that looks so good? But now the thing about the Lions is they were gutted. Offensive coordinator gone. Defensive coordinator gone. A lot of pieces from that defense is gone. You have the offense still looks similar. There's the pieces that are moving around were probably little upgrades here or there. Getting a different cornerback, which is what they went out and did. Carlton Davis went to the Patriots, so they needed a second cornerback to really compete, which I think they found in DJ Reed from the Jets. They ended up signing him. Kyle Allen's your backup quarterback. Avonte Maddox comes in from the Eagles, obviously fresh off a Super Bowl with them. They went out and got Tyleik Williams, defensive tackle from Ohio State, monster of a defensive tackle. And then Tate Rutledge they got in the second round, so offensive line help to really make sure that Jared Goff stays upright, has the time. They lost Kevin Zeitler. He goes over to the Titans. He was their starting center. Jonah Williams, defensive lineman, goes over to the Saints. Zadarius Smith retires. The same thing with Frank Ragnow. So two centers go out the door. Frank Ragnow was a leader on that offense, and he's gone, just retiring. They lost quite a few free agents, like I said, on that defensive side, defensive coordinator. And not only that, but they lost their defensive line coach, who's the defensive coordinator here in New England. So how will the retool go? Will the defense still be as good? Did they upgrade enough positions? Are the rookies going to have to step in earlier than expected? That's the problem with having such a great season, but not winning. Normally when a team wins a Super Bowl, they get gutted because players want to chase money and everything else like that. You have a Super Bowl title. Well, if you're on a team like the Lions that showed promise of being Super Bowl champions, didn't quite get there, and then had a disappointing end to last year, with a step back, players tend to look at that and go, well, maybe my best chance is elsewhere. Or, again, even in this climate with players maybe not valuing a Super Bowl as much. When a contract comes out for you and somebody offers you something, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, if it's above and beyond what you think you're going to get, you take it. I mean, you can criticize somebody all you want, but you're not putting a contract in front of yourself. A team is coming to you. So that's the problem with a good team that's had a couple of good seasons. Sometimes money just comes from other clubs and you're just like, hey, this is it. I got to take the money. So, For some of those guys, I don't think Carlton Davis is coming to the New England Patriots thinking, hey, he's going to win a Super Bowl this year. I think they paid to get a number 2 cornerback. He was one of the better ones on the board at the time. He took the money. They go out and get DJ Reed. DJ Reed is now going from a Jet situation that was not a Super Bowl contender, probably still not, to now you probably have a little bit of a Super Bowl contender. They re-signed a lot of their guys that were in place, which is good. Are they just sticking for what they know? Because obviously that team has gotten them to the cusp of a Super Bowl appearance, but not quite there. So I look at those things and I go, I'm glad that they're paying the guys that they know. I'm glad that they're paying the guys that they believe in and everything else like that. But are they the right guys? Dan Campbell's a very, he seems like a loyal head coach that he wants his players in place and the guys that he gets along with and everything else like that. But if they're not the right guys, you're tying up money and putting yourself in a precarious position because we're talking about the same guys just a year older. And that doesn't necessarily bode well all the time. Those guys that they're resigning have things like, they have shortcomings just like everyone else. And, in the NFL, when you have players, there's development process that typically takes time. The guys they're re-signing, they've developed to probably who they're going to be. So, I mean, we know who Jared Goff is. Jared Goff is not going to go out and surprise you with some new attributes. He might get a little bit better with accuracy, or he might throw for more yards, or he might throw for a few more touchdowns, but he's a guy that's going to make a mistake here or there. He's a guy that's going to cost your team a game here or there. But overall, he's going to be a leader. He's going to make the right moves. If there are just going to be hiccups along the way. He's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not Lamar Jackson. He's not any one of those types of players. He's a middle-of-the-road quarterback that on his best day looks great. On his worst day looks, you're looking at a 4-interception day sometimes. I don't know if he's actually thrown one or not. I'd have to take a look, but, he's made errors in his career in big moments. We've seen it. So, the offensive line void, is that this going to be a problem? Tate Rutledge is a great pick in the second round to help alleviate some of those holes that that were created in free agency and retirement and everything else. But it's a question mark. With those question marks, does the offense become more stagnant? They have really good receivers. They have a great 1-2 punch for running backs. And again, you have Jared Goff, a solid quarterback. So, are they going to be in the same position, or have the Packers caught them at this point? Which brings me to the Packers. They went 11-6 last year. They've made the playoffs 5 out of 6 years. They look good to challenge the Lions at this point. I think they're probably playoff bound again. I don't think that's really going out on a limb anywhere. Aaron Banks comes over as a guard from the 49ers. Hobbs comes over as a cornerback from the Raiders. So pretty good picks up. Mecole Hardman, a good, veteran third or fourth wide receiver on this team. Isaiah McDuffie re-signed. They drafted Matthew Golden. It was the first time in 20 years the Packers have drafted a wide receiver in the first round, and he was a speedster. He wasn't necessarily the best guy out there, but he can get down the field quickly. And if Jordan Love can just huck up the football, he'll go get it. But if you're looking at him to run consistent routes, maybe not the best pick at 20 or 23. I think they drafted him 23rd. But again, first wide receiver in 20 years they've picked. They've relied on late round picks and kind of like backup guys that have come in and obviously worked with Aaron Rodgers for a long time. Jordan Love was here, Brett Favre. So, I mean, they've had consistency at the quarterback position for a while. And being able to make players better is what a good football player, a good quarterback will do. TJ Slayton, defensive tackle, went to the Bengals. Again, trying to help that Bengals defense. A.J. Dillon is now an Eagle. Josh Myers is over with the Jets. It was a center for them. And Eric Stokes, their cornerback, actually kind of traded places with Nate Hobbs and goes to the Raiders. The investments in the offensive line and wide receivers for Jordan Love, they've proven again that Jordan Love is the guy for them. And again, they're not necessarily trying to bring in somebody else or anything else like that. He's dealt with some injuries. He dealt with some injuries during the preseason as well. So I believe his thumb. So where are they going to be now that they've made those investments and gone out? They traded Kenny Clark, their defensive tackle, and 2 first-round picks for Micah Parsons, who's probably going to start slow because he had a little bit of a back issue, allegedly in Dallas. Because again, Dallas, the Cowboys are Jerry Jones he likes to just keep talking. And that's all well and good. He is on the right to. He's the owner. He's the general manager. He can do whatever he wants. But I mean, at some point in time, it's got to stop there in Dallas. There's possible holes still at center. Cornerback looks like they've kind of evened itself out, and then kind of that backup running back. If Josh Jacobs goes down, who's your guy? I mean, Marshawn Lloyd. I believe it's Marshawn Lloyd. I mean, he was a rookie last year. But does that still hold? I mean, they had a really good 1-2 punch with Jacobs and Dillon. Obviously, paying what Dillon probably wanted to be, not the featured back was probably not the plan. They probably reinvested somewhere. But I think the Packers have the best shot at making a run at the division title. I mean, it's going to be between the Lions and the Packers to me. Nothing against the Vikings that we have coming up, I should say. But we have a lot of unknown with that. JJ McCarthy was their first round pick. We're talking about the Vikings now, obviously. JJ McCarthy was their draft pick, their future quarterback, and he got injured in the preseason, and they had to go with Sam Darnold. And so Sam Darnold looked really good for 90% of the year. And then the last 2 regular season games and then the playoff game, he looked like Sam Darnold. The Sam Darnold we know. So they move on from Sam Darnold. JJ McCarthy is the guy, and he's still relatively unknown. We've heard great things out of Vikings camp. I expect him to have a big year, but it's unknown. You can't tell me that you're a definitive person on JJ McCarthy. He's had a year to learn the offense from a film perspective, learn the NFL from a film perspective. The speed of the game is different from sitting on the sideline and seeing it to being in it. Everybody has a plan until you get hit in the mouth. That's the saying, right? It's going to be the same thing with JJ McCarthy. He's going to come out and he's going to be, this gunslinger. He's going to be this, that, whatever, until he gets hit. And then we see who he is. So I expect him to have a good year. I still think he's going to be a very good NFL quarterback. But again, those things change fairly quickly in this league. They bring in Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave to shore up their defensive tackles. Will Freeze and Ryan Kelly both come over from the Colts to help the offensive line. Jeff Okudah from the Texans to help shore up that passing defense. And then Bubba Bolden, who hasn't been in the NFL since 2022, is a guy that's come in to help the, at least depth in the secondary. Cameron Bynum goes over to the Colts. Sam Darnold, as we mentioned, is a Seahawk now. And Daniel Jones, who they picked up mid-year after the Giants decided to let him go, is now the starter in Indianapolis. We have a complete quarterback room shakeup, really. Where Darnold was your starter, Jones was your backup, and then now all of a sudden you're in with McCarthy. Sam Howell is your backup now. And again, Sam Howell started a lot of games with Washington, but wasn't, he could throw a ton of passing yards, wasn't the best at making decisions, but he's been around. He has the talent to be an NFL quarterback. There are worse options should McCarthy go down, but not one of the top ones. Addison, the wide receiver, his first name is escaping me at the moment. Jordan Addison. I said James Addison. Jordan Addison, suspended for 3 games. which is an early season hit. They still have Justin Jefferson, who's one of, if not the best wide receiver in the NFL. I think it's him and Jamar Chase are 1-2. But losing Jordan Addison means that the Minnesota Vikings are going to be thin at that position going into the season. And, you're looking at their depth chart now. They brought back Adam Thielen, which was a big move towards the end of cut-down day. There was a clip on the line as well as Adam Thielen celebrating with his family to go back to Minnesota, which was kind of cool. They obviously love that area and everything else like that. But you're talking about Ty Felton, Miles Price, Jalen Naylor. Rondell Moore got injured and he's going to be on IR probably for the season. So, yeah, they were thin there. They're still pretty thin. I mean, it's going to be Jefferson and Thielen as 1-2 for the first 3 games, and then who's going to step up as 3. So they're still thin there. TJ Hawkinson is still here as their tight end. So a great wide, receiving tight end. So there's some options. Where are they compared to the rest of the division? I think the Vikings and the Bears are going to fight for 3rd and 4th place. The Bears still could very much be in 4th place. It depends on JJ McCarthy. It depends on the changes that they've made and the injuries that are going into the season and everything else. I think they've done very well at fixing some offensive line troubles. I think they've done pretty well at fixing some defensive line troubles. Now, can the rest of the team fill in around those improvements? Quarterback is obviously a big one, is a very big if. But if I'm sure there'll be growing pains. I'm sure that the first year, if he can stay healthy, JJ McCarthy will go through hiccups. But it's not like he doesn't have players to throw to. It's not like they haven't addressed an offensive line to keep him upright. But I think it's going to probably end up being, I think the Packers are going to win the division. I think the Lions will come in second. I think probably those two still make the playoffs. I think the Vikings will be 3rd. I'll say the Vikings will be 3rd, and I still say the Bears are probably in that learning phase of Ben Johnson and still need some things on that roster. I think it's going to be a very competitive division. I think top to bottom it's very competitive. I wouldn't be surprised if every team split the series between each other. But from here, we're going to go to the NFC South and then the NFC West, and we'll put those two out, probably back-to-back because it'll probably be Thursday morning. And then football's back. Football is back, so for any guy out there that hasn't told his wife or girlfriend that from here on out it's Sundays at 1 o'clock are their time, I would figure out how to do that now. I'm pretty sure my wife is listening downstairs and probably rolling her eyes at me in this moment, but we had a discussion the other day. Sundays at 1 o'clock, those are going to be my time. Probably also be working, but that's how life goes sometimes. But anyway, football is back on Thursday. We'll go into recap of Thursday night football. We'll do a recap after Monday night football. Hopefully have an episode out right after that and look at week 1 and kind of see if things have panned out the way that, we thought or I thought or whoever. And from there, it's football season. All right. We'll get you on the next one. Thank you very much for taking a listen. Please go to loftsidebanter.com. That's Loftside BANTR. Loftsidebanter@gmail.com for any news, notes, or any comments you have or anything you want to talk about. We're always looking for people that want to come on. We're going to be talking to a lot of fantasy football opponents this year through the Fantasy Turf War and everything else like that. So we'll have some good interviews. We're going to be doing some interviews with card collectors coming up, and it's going to tie into sports, obviously, and everything else like that. But thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you for the next one.